You're looking at Houston, where the next Democratic presidential debate will take place 1 week from today. The 10 candidates who made the cut include 9 politicians and Andrew Yang, the 44-year-old entrepreneur who made millions running a test prep company, had 0 political experience, but his campaign took off with his proposal to give every American adult $12,000 a year. His early success has surprised almost everyone except Yang himself. In a CBS This Morning broadcast exclusive for our Road to 2020 series, we met up with Yang at his rather Spartan campaign headquarters here in New York City. This is national headquarters?
Yes. Yes, this is it. Where the magic happens.
This feels like a pretty modest space from which to launch a national campaign.
It was more modest than this before. This is actually like...
Now it feels plush?
Yeah. This is with furniture and stuff. Yeah.
On the walls, headlines chart the course of the campaign.
When we started in early 2018, I was a longer than long shot.
But Andrew Yang thrives on being underestimated. You actually thought you could get somewhere with this?
Well, I was apparently correct.
In the first 2 debates, you were given the least amount of actual speaking time.
The opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math.
Do you expect that to change this time?
I do. But after the last debate, we raised over $1 million in the 48 hours afterwards. And so now I've developed a reputation for making the most of whatever time I get.
See you on the debate stage!
His more than 200,000 unique donors have given an average of $25 apiece. Many attracted to his blunt assessment of America's future. How do you feel about the American dream? The idea of it?
I love it. I've lived it. My family immigrated to this country.
Do you still believe in it?
Well, I'm a numbers guy, and so the numbers say that you have a 50-50 chance of doing better than your parents if you're born in the 90s. And that chance was 93% if you were born in the 40s or 50s. So the American dream is dying by the numbers, and Americans know it.
Yang's dark outlook is similar to President Trump's, but he blames the rise of AI and automation.
We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And if those states aren't familiar, those are all the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. So to me, this was a straight automation story that immigrants are being scapegoated for economic problems they have little to nothing to do with.
It's not immigration, it's automation.
It's not immigration, it's automation.
And it will lead to widespread despair. He writes in his book, The War on Normal People, creating a hyper-stratified society like something out of the Hunger Games. Some advisors have suggested to you you should be more optimistic in the way you paint the future of the country.
Yeah, I have gotten that advice. That's true. And I think most politicians have been sold on the fact the American people don't want to hear hard truths, and I think that's wrong.
They want to hear it straight, you think?
Yeah, they want solutions, not happy sound bites at this point.
Yang's solution, the cornerstone of his campaign, is the Freedom Dividend. He'd pay every adult $1,000 a month, no strings attached, and fund it in part with a 10% value-added tax on business production. The Tax Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, has run the numbers and says basically they don't think your math adds up, that you couldn't pay for a benefit that significant with the funds that you're talking about raising here.
They're correct that it's not that the revenue pays for it dollar for dollar, but what they overlook is that if you put this money into Americans' hands, the money doesn't disappear. Where does it go? It goes back into our consumer economy and circulates over and over again.
The argument is it would discourage people from working. Would it make more sense to guarantee people jobs like Bernie Sanders is promising?
The first thing is that there's no data that shows that us getting $1,000 a month would reduce work levels overall. In terms of Bernie's federal jobs guarantee, I understand the spirit of it, but in practice it would be very, very difficult to implement and manage. Imagining that all Americans want to work for the federal government is something that Bernie might think is in our minds, but that's not the case when I talk to most Americans.
Yang says he doubled his campaign staff of about 30 last month and will soon double it again. If for some reason you were not to get the nomination, would you consider it?
For some reason, sorry.
You're laughing.
No, I like the cordiality.
Would you consider a third-party candidacy?
My job is to help get Donald Trump out of office, and I would do nothing that would increase the odds of him sticking around. And I think a third-party candidacy would do just that.
Yang's candidacy, of course, is still a long shot. He's polling between 2% and 4% nationwide and lower, actually, in the early states.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot of work to do. But he's put some ideas on the table that most politicians have not wanted to talk about.
Very bold.
Very bold.
Yeah.
And he's betting that Americans feel that things are not getting better and want to hear about that.
It's also interesting to see if some of those ideas spark other ideas within other candidates as we move forward as well.
I mean, but he wants the idea of a unique, of a universal income to actually become policy. He said he doesn't want it just to be talked about. He wants it to happen.
Never heard anything like that, but we shall see.
Yes, this morning, Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang says he is confident he can defeat frontrunner Joe Biden. Right now, the businessman is polling at about 2 to 4% nationwide. The 2020 hopeful told us why he believes he has what it will take to beat President Trump. Polls show that most Democratic voters and Democratic-leaning independents, 2/3, the main thing they want in a candidate is someone who can beat Donald Trump.
Yep. Yes, I'm one of only 2 candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say that they would support.
Why is that?
It's because I'm focused on solving the problems that they see around them every day. And I'm laser focused on trying to make their lives better. That's why I'm getting thousands of Trump voters, as well as independents and libertarians and Democrats and progressives. If I'm the Democratic nominee, we win. That's the math.
But that's Joe Biden's argument, too.
That's one reason why he's leading in the polls, and that's one reason you'll see me leading in the polls before too long.
You think you can beat Joe Biden?
I think I'll be the nominee. If you listen to Joe talk about it, his main argument is that his election is going to be a restoration of the Obama-Biden administration, in essence, which is a move literally backwards in time. And so, to me, saying that we can somehow erase not just Donald Trump's presidency, but all of the reasons why people voted for Donald Trump, to me, is not correct. I mean, these things have happened, and we're going to have to address them. We're going to have to solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected. 1, if we're going to win, and 2, if we're going to move the country forward.
It's interesting. Yang is appealing to Trump voters in a lot of ways because he's also painting a fairly dark picture of the direction of the economy. But he's saying the problem isn't immigration, it's automation. And he's the candidate who's offering $1,000 a month, a freedom dividend, he calls it, to everybody in the country, essentially. And he's sort of carved out a space no one else has.
Freedom Dividend is a good name, and $1,000 a month is a good policy.
It's pretty attractive. How much space and how many people do you have here?
We have about 30 people here in New York, this office and an office on another floor that we expanded to because we ran out of room. We had people coming out of the windows here. No one could have a conversation.
This feels like a pretty modest space from which to launch a national campaign.
It was more modest than this before. This is actually
Now it feels plush.
Yeah. This is with furniture and stuff. Yeah, it was more modest before.
So in the beginning, how many people were here?
In the beginning, there were 4 people, maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, and you?
I think I might even include me. It's true. But again, this is a year in it was early 2018 when no one was paying any attention.
Right.
So we knew we just had to keep doing the work.
When you started, why did you feel it was possible to run as long as you've run at this point?
We had a story to tell, and you just want to start beating the drum as soon as possible. I've been to Iowa and New Hampshire 17 times each. Some of the people that I met there, I met a year and a half ago, and for them, it's so exciting to see our campaign go from the guy no one's ever heard of who just shows up in New Hampshire one day to now 6 in the polls. Same thing in Iowa. So we just knew we were going to help lay the groundwork for the campaign.
What's your plan in Iowa and New Hampshire?
Well, the great thing is that Iowa rewards passion and activism because the caucus system is very high commitment. It's not just go pull a ballot. You have to want to debate your neighbors and really make a case. And that's very much in line with the people that are attracted to this campaign. We get a lot of passion and activism in the Yang Gang.
What's the bar for you in Iowa and New Hampshire to stay in the race, do you think?
I think that we need to exceed expectations, and I'm certain we will do just that. because the press has set relatively low expectations for us at every level. And so when we finish among the top candidates in Iowa and New Hampshire, we're going to end up being the story, probably even more than some of the folks that have been frontrunners the whole time. Can you imagine the headlines nationwide? Andrew Yang finishes second in Iowa, or Andrew Yang finishes first in New Hampshire.
Obviously, you imagined it.
Yeah, I just said it. So, but then if you imagine what the headlines will be, people will be like, how did that happen? And then you'll see our campaign just continue to grow as people wake up to the possibility that we can do this for ourselves.
Yeah. If for some reason you were not to get the nomination, would you consider it?
For some reason, sorry.
You're laughing.
I know, I like the cordiality.
Would you consider a third-party candidacy?
My job is to help get Donald Trump out of office, and I would do nothing that would increase the odds of him sticking around. And I think a third-party candidacy would do just that.
So that's not an option.
I will do nothing that would help Donald Trump remain in office.
If you don't prevail, is it enough that you've brought the idea of a freedom dividend into the conversation?
Well, I'm a problem solver, and so drawing attention to a problem is helpful, but solving the problem is much, much more helpful. So I'm going to be happy when we pass the freedom dividend and get this done. If we pass the freedom dividend and I'm not president, I will still be thrilled. But I will not be thrilled if it's like, oh, people are talking about it. I mean, talk is cheap. We got to take action.
What do you got up here?
Oh, these are fun dated headlines about the trajectory of the race. So when we started in early 2018, I was a longer than long shot.
How would you describe yourself now?
I'd describe myself as sixth in climbing. And then here we have, I could run at least a semi-serious campaign, so that's an upgrade from longer than long shot. And then here he's a candidate with no
I noticed that. What do you think of Yang Mentum?
I love it. You know, it's very catchy. We should make Yang Mentum a thing. We certainly made Yang Gang a thing. So you can see there's an upward trajectory, and then you can imagine what the next headlines will say. It's like, now it's, how's Andrew Yang on the debate stage when senators and governors didn't make it? And then after that, it's how is he top 5? And then it's going to continue.
Nerdiest presidential campaign in history.
Yeah, I might already have that one wrapped up.
So you don't deny that headline?
No, I mean, I've said that I want to give my State of the Union addresses with a PowerPoint deck to help explain how we're doing by measurements like life expectancy and mental health and substance abuse levels. And so I think that probably makes me the nerdiest campaign in history already.
Is Andrew Yang for real?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is, in the article, they actually say, yes, he is for real. They don't say that. That'd probably be bad journalism.
10 presidential candidates will appear on the Democratic debate stage next week in Houston. Of the 10, only Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders are averaging double-digit support, according to Real Clear Politics. But that's not deterring businessman Andrew Yang from thinking he can be the party's nominee and beat President Trump. Here's what he told Anthony Mason in a CBS This Morning broadcast exclusive.
Polls show that most Democratic voters and Democratic-leaning independents, 2/3, the main thing they want in a candidate is someone who can beat Donald Trump.
Yep. Yes, I'm one of only 2 candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say that they would support.
Why is that?
It's because I'm focused on solving the problems that they see around them every day. And I'm laser focused on trying to make their lives better. That's why I'm getting thousands of Trump voters, as well as independents and libertarians, and Democrats and progressives. If I'm the Democratic nominee, we win. That's the math.
But that's Joe Biden's argument, too.
Oh, that's one reason why he's leading in the polls, and that's one reason you'll see me leading in the polls before too long.
You think you can beat Joe Biden?
I think I'll be the nominee. If you listen to Joe talk about it, his main argument is that his election is going to be a restoration of the Obama-Biden administration, in essence, which is a move literally backwards in time. And so, to me, saying that we can somehow erase not just Donald Trump's presidency, but all of the reasons why people voted for Donald Trump, to me, is not correct. I mean, you know, these things have happened, and we're going to have to address them. We're going to have to solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected. 1, if we're going to win, and 2, if we're going to move the country forward.
CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now. Welcome, Caitlin. You have traveled to several early states. What is it that voters are actually saying about Andrew Yang?
You know, it's interesting. His name doesn't necessarily come up organically the way it does Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden. But what Andrew Yang has is this kind of big, intense internet following. And that's
the
what's
Yang
really
gang, right?
the Yang gang, exactly. And that's what's really helped him kind of get to this point that he has made all of the debates. He's beaten out governors and even some senators to get on that debate stage next week. He's also attracted some controversy on the internet. Some kind of, more conservative people on the internet have taken to him. So what he has been able to do is kind of grow this kind of grassroots organization. And what I'm looking for is to see kind of whether that translates on the ground. He has been campaigning. He's been at all of the big cattle calls and forums. We talked to him most recently at the Iowa State Fair, and I think his pitch for this universal basic income is something that allowed him to have an immediate theory of the case, which some of these other candidates haven't been able to do.
Yeah.
He talks about how he's an Asian that likes math, and so that's a good contrast to the current president. So he has kind of a ready-made bumper sticker. The question is, how does he start attracting real support on the ground?
Right. For people who aren't familiar, this is the idea that he would give every working American $1,000 a month and no strings attached. Is that an idea, Caitlin, that voters or even other candidates seem to be latching onto in any way?
You know, not really. And in his interview with you earlier this year, he talked about how this isn't necessarily a new concept. He talked about how Martin Luther King proposed something similar. Other candidates, though, just aren't ready to go there. Elizabeth Warren says it's better to, focus on student loan forgiveness. Kamala Harris said it's better to focus on her refundable tax credit for the middle class. Even Bernie Sanders has said that there are other ways to kind of help workers through this. Cory Booker, though, has a proposal to have baby bonds. So candidates have been talking about kind of how to help the middle class and working class folks kind of through this transition that we're seeing with automation, which is kind of Andrew Yang's reasoning for all of this, that all these jobs are being lost to automation, and so there has to be a way for government to step in. But there are a lot of critics, not only within the Democratic Party, but particularly outside of it, who say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Does this disincentivize work? Garnering some criticism, but it has allowed him to make a direct case to the public.
So, as we mentioned, polling averages show Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren consistently the only three candidates really polling with double-digit support. But all of the candidates who are going to be on the debate stage in Houston next week have received at least 2% in 4 polls. Do those lower-tiered candidates who are still on the debate stage feel that they are competitive at this point, heading into September, mid-September here?
Exactly. Well, making this debate stage was a big goal for a lot of these candidates, and you would think by being able to meet those thresholds that it's a good thing for your campaign. The trouble is that since the field is narrowing, this will showcase, perhaps more so than before, what the tiers look like, especially since you'll have Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden on the same stage for the first time that we've seen these debates. And they will be kind of the marquee matchup because they represent kind of two ideas within the Democratic Party and where it should go. So these other candidates like Amy Klobuchar and some others who have been polling lower in the pack need to use this debate to stand out, which is going to be very tricky. They will have, I believe, 3 hours, though, of debates to try to make that case. And then you have some others who are not on this stage who are still saying, Tulsi Gabbard and some others, that they want to try to make that October debate. So whether this, in fact, does start to winnow the field. A lot of strategists I've talked to, though, say that people are now starting to pay attention. Over the summer, people were on vacation and not really watching these debates. Now comes kind of crunch time.
Right, post-Labor Day, a lot of people are more focused on this now. Caitlin Huey-Burns, always great to see you. Caitlin, thank you.